ever wonder, like, why are some people, just like they're, born with a GPS, and other people like me can get lost in their own neighborhood?
Right. Yeah.
Well, today we are doing a deep dive into the science behind navigation. And we're going to be referencing this super interesting article from Knowable magazine.
Okay, cool.
And one of the cool things I found out is it turns out that our sense of direction may actually be more about nurture than nature.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually what's so interesting about this research is that it kind of debunks that long-held assumption that you're either born with a good sense of direction or not. And we're finding out more and more that the environments that we navigate in, the cultures we grow up in, and even our own personalities can really shape our sense of direction.
Okay, so like maybe I'm not doomed to always be getting lost. This is good news.
Yep. Oh.
This is very good news. But the article starts off and it talks about this cognitive scientist named David Uttle. And he got lost on a Boy Scout hike for 2.5 days.
Oh, wow.
Like as a cognitive scientist.
That's 2.5 days. Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, so there's obviously like a big range of navigational ability.
Right, and that really highlights that navigational skills exist on a spectrum. So you have people like him, and then you have people on the other end of the spectrum that can pinpoint a location, within a couple degrees of accuracy. Yeah. So it's really quite fascinating, the range. But what's interesting is that someone like David Uttle, who might have trouble navigating a hiking trail, could excel at something like navigating a complex social situation.
Yeah.
So our brains are really adaptable, and different types of navigation might actually rely on different strengths that we have cognitively.
Okay, that's a good point. I am much better at navigating a crowded party than like a new city.
Exactly.
But so if genes aren't like totally the deciding factor, then what is it about like our brains that makes some of us like good with directions and others not so much?
Well, research is now like illuminating that interplay between our genes and our experiences, especially those early childhood years. Like there's a twin study, and they found that genetics only play a very modest role. But it's the non-shared environment, all those unique experiences we have, that really, really mold our abilities. So you think about a kid who grows up exploring the woods behind their house versus a kid who mostly navigates like a structured urban environment. They're going to have different skills and strategies.
Okay, so it's like you're saying my childhood glued to video games as opposed to like climbing trees. Could that have actually been helpful for my navigation skills?
It's possible because video games, especially ones with those like rich spatial environments, they can engage the hippocampus. Yeah. And that's a brain area that's super important for navigation.
Yeah.
It helps us form those spatial memories, create those mental maps. So your hippocampus is like your brain's internal GPS.
So even if I wasn't out there like physically exploring, my brain was still like kind of building?
Exactly. It's taking in the information and kind of creating those representations.
Those maps, yeah. But wait a minute, isn't the hippocampus also involved in memory?
Yes.
So is there some kind of like connection between how we remember things and how we navigate?
Absolutely. Yeah. You're right. There's a huge connection between memory and navigation. Yeah. Like think about it. To remember a route or finding your way back to a place you've been, that all relies on recalling that spatial information. So your hippocampus is like that bridge between those memories and our spatial awareness. And the more that we engage in things that really challenge our spatial reasoning, whether it's exploring a new city or you said video games, the stronger those connections become.
That makes so much sense, yeah. So it's not just about memorizing landmarks.
Right.
It's about like building those maps in our head. And the article brings up this study called Sea Hero Quest that looked at cultural influences on navigation.
That's right.
4 million people.
4 million people.
Playing a navigation game.
A navigation game? I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yes. Sea Hero Quest, groundbreaking in its scale and its scope. And it found that cultural factors are huge in shaping navigational abilities. Like people from Nordic countries, right, where orienteering's big, they tended to do better in spatial reasoning tasks. Because you think about orienteering, you're in a dense forest, you have a map and compass, you have to figure out how to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
That takes some serious mental mapping skills.
So like battling those chaotic European streets actually might make you better at navigating than those nice grid-like cities. Take that, Chicago.
I mean, who knows?
But hold on, doesn't this like cultural influence thing, doesn't that play into that stereotype that men are better navigators than women? Is there any truth to that?
It's a really common belief, but research is kind of dismantling that myth.
Okay.
The supposed gender gap that we see in navigation, that's more likely due to cultural factors and experience, not some inherent ability that men have. In cultures where women have been equally encouraged to explore and engage in spatial tasks, the differences in skills between genders, they basically vanish.
So it's not a battle of the sexes, it's a battle against societal expectations. I like that. But
Yeah.
is there a real-world example of a culture where we see this gender parity
Yeah,
in terms of navigation playing out?
absolutely. The Semane,
Okay.
they're an indigenous community living in the Bolivian Amazon.
Okay.
And for them, navigating the rainforest isn't just like a leisure activity.
Right.
It's essential for survival. And the men and women, they share equal responsibility for hunting, gathering, and navigating this incredibly complex environment.
Yeah.
And their skills are remarkable. And it's not just about memorizing landmarks. It's understanding the interconnectedness of the ecosystem, the patterns of the sun, the flow of the river. They take this very holistic approach.
Wow, that's incredible. So it's like their whole culture is built around spatial awareness and this understanding of their environments. So it's not just about who you are, but where you've been and what you've done. That's encouraging, for those of us who haven't spent a lifetime in the Amazon.
Exactly. And it's not just about culture either. Like, individual personality traits come into play. Like, people who are curious and enjoy exploring, they tend to develop better navigational skills. And on the flip side, anxiety can really hinder us. Like, if we're stressed about getting lost,
Yeah,
we're more likely to miss those important cues and make errors.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So those of us who enjoy exploring a new city or getting lost in a really immersive video game, we're maybe unknowingly honing our navigation skills.
You could be. You could be.
I'll take it as a win for us gamers.
There you go.
But let's break down the how of navigation.
Okay.
The article mentions 2 key sub-skills, route following and survey knowledge. So what are those exactly?
Okay. So route following. That's basically when you navigate using a set of directions or landmarks, like turn left at the red house, then right at the big oak tree. It's very sequential, step by step.
Okay.
Survey knowledge, on the other hand, is all about building that mental map. So it's understanding the spatial relationships between different locations and being able to picture the layout in your mind.
Okay, so route following is using directions.
Yeah.
And a mental map is having that big picture understanding.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Wouldn't you kind of need both to navigate well?
You're right. Both are valuable. But research suggests that survey knowledge, those mental maps, those are extra beneficial for being flexible and navigating creatively, especially when you hit an unexpected obstacle. Think about it. You're relying just on route following, and then boom, road closure. You're thrown off. But if you have that mental map, you can adapt, find alternate routes, and still get where you need to go.
I see how that would come in handy. The article mentions a study where they drove volunteers along the same routes again and again.
And then tested their ability to make maps and find shortcuts. And they actually had them draw maps.
Yeah.
By hand.
By hand. I love that visual element.
Yeah.
Some people, they created these incredibly detailed, accurate maps, almost like perfect little replicas.
Wow.
Others, not so much. A little more abstract.
Yeah.
And they found that those who drew more accurate maps, they were also way better at finding shortcuts and navigating efficiently.
Talk about getting lost in translation. So a strong mental map is really key. But how do they actually help us navigate, in the real world?
Well, they highlighted an example of a neuroscientist, and he uses different strategies depending on the environment.
Okay.
So in a city with that nice grid layout, he mostly relies on cardinal directions.
Okay.
North, south, east, west. But when he's navigating a city with winding streets, irregular layouts like Philadelphia, he switches to more of a landmark-based approach. Relies on those visual cues, spatial relationships. His brain adapts to what the environment demands. It shows how flexible our navigation can be.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Adaptability seems like it's a key element of being good at navigating.
Totally.
So that makes perfect sense. Adaptability, it seems like it's just such a key element of being good at navigating.
Definitely. It's all about being able to adjust to the situation.
So for those of us who tend to get lost even with a map and a compass, is there any hope for us?
Oh, absolutely.
Can we actually train our brains to be better navigators?
You can, like any skill, navigation can be improved with practice and, being conscious and making the effort. You just have to kind of understand how your brain processes that spatial information And then you can use that to develop good strategies.
Okay, so you're saying that someone like me who once got lost trying to find the bathroom in my own house can actually improve my sense of direction.
Yeah, you can. It might take a bit more effort.
Yeah.
A little more patience.
Okay.
But the brain is incredibly plastic.
Yeah.
It can change and adapt throughout our lives.
That's good.
Think about learning a new language or playing an instrument.
Yep.
It requires dedication, it requires practice, but it's so rewarding. And navigation is no different.
Okay, that's a relief. I was starting to feel a little hopeless there for a second.
Yeah. No, you got this.
Okay, so if I ditch the GPS and start paying more attention to landmarks, will that actually, rewire my brain to become a better navigator?
You're on the right track. It's about really engaging with your surroundings and being more mindful.
Okay.
So instead of just passively following that blue dot on your phone, try to actually create a mental map of where you are. Notice the landmarks, the street names, the way the sun casts shadows.
Okay.
All of those little details, they help you build a richer understanding of the space around you.
So instead of being a slave to the technology, I need to become more like a real-life explorer, observing, interpreting the world around me.
I love that. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. Getting lost can actually be a really good learning experience because it forces you to problem solve. You have to think creatively about your environment, and you're going to start to develop those new strategies for navigating.
So, there's a silver lining to those moments of navigational despair. I guess even, seasoned explorers, even they get lost sometimes.
Of course they do. Everyone gets lost sometimes.
Okay.
The key is that you learn from it. You adapt your strategies, and then you keep refining those skills.
Okay. I'm feeling much more optimistic about my navigational future already.
Good.
So we've talked about the science behind it, the cultural factors, the personality traits. But what about the practical applications? What are some key takeaways for our listeners who, they want to get better, they want to improve their sense of direction?
Be patient with yourself.
Yeah.
First and foremost. Navigation is complex.
Right.
It takes time and practice to develop those skills. Don't get discouraged if you don't see results immediately. It's about those small, consistent efforts to engage with your surroundings more mindfully.
Good point. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither is a good sense of direction.
Exactly. And remember, it's not just about getting from point A to point B. It's about developing that understanding of where you are in the world. It's about cultivating a sense of spatial awareness that can actually enrich your life in so many ways.
Okay, so it's a journey of self-discovery, both literally and figuratively. I like it.
Yeah.
But let's get practical for a second. What are some specific things that our listeners can do to start flexing those navigational muscles?
Well, aside from ditching the GPS and paying attention to landmarks, there's some fun exercises you can try. One simple but effective one is to sketch maps from memory.
Okay.
So after you've been somewhere new, take a few minutes and just try to draw the layout, include any landmarks or interesting things that you remember.
So unleash my inner cartographer.
Yeah.
I love that. What else?
Another good one is practice giving directions to someone else.
Okay.
This forces you to think about the route from their perspective, to be clear with your language, and to really think about what landmarks or cues would be helpful to them.
Oh, that's good. I'm always the one getting lost, so maybe teaching someone else how to navigate will actually help me solidify my own understanding of it.
Exactly.
It's like they say the best way to learn something is to teach it.
That's right. And don't be afraid to use different tools and techniques.
Yeah.
There are tons of apps and websites out there that are designed to improve navigation skills.
Right.
From virtual reality simulations to interactive maps that challenge your spatial reasoning.
So embrace technology, but just use it wisely.
Exactly. Find that balance. Choose tools that help you learn without becoming a crutch.
Yeah.
Remember, it's not about finding the perfect solution. It's about figuring out what works best for you and your own individual learning style.
Okay, that's really helpful. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from the science of navigation to, practical tips for improvement. But before we wrap things up, I'm curious, from your perspective, what's the most surprising or intriguing thing that you've learned about navigation?
What continues to fascinate me is just this idea that our navigational abilities are so intertwined with our experiences, our cultures, and even our personalities. It's like this perfect example of nature and nurture working together to shape who we are and how we interact with the world. And it just reinforces this idea that there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
It really challenges that belief that we're either born with a good sense of direction or doomed to wander aimlessly forever.
Totally. And it highlights how important it is that we embrace diversity, not just in our backgrounds and perspectives, but also in the way we approach navigation.
I love that. So like celebrating different ways of finding our way, both literally and metaphorically.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe by embracing those differences and learning from each other,
Yeah.
we can all become better navigators, not just in the physical world, but in life itself.
Beautifully put. So it's not just about reaching a destination. It's about the journey and the connections we make along the way.
Yeah, I love that analogy, like celebrating all the different ways of finding our way, both, literally and metaphorically.
Yeah.
It's like navigation isn't just about streets and maps. It's about, navigating all of life's challenges and opportunities.
It is.
But speaking of maps, the article talks a little bit about the downsides of relying too much on GPS.
Right.
So does that mean we should all just toss our smartphones into the nearest river?
Well, not necessarily. Technology can be a great tool.
Right.
But like anything else, it's about using it wisely. The research shows that over-relying on GPS, it can actually make our own internal navigation skills worse.
Oh, so it's like our brains become lazy navigators.
Kinda, yeah.
We're just outsourcing all the work to our devices.
Yeah. You're letting the device do all the heavy lifting.
I'm totally guilty of that.
Yeah, a lot of us are. But are there any real-world consequences to this GPS dependence?
Mm-hmm.
Besides, the occasional embarrassing moment when my phone dies and I'm totally lost.
Well, some studies have shown that using GPS a lot could be connected to a decline in spatial memory.
Yeah.
And our ability to make those mental maps.
So any muscle, if you don't use it, you lose it.
Exactly. And in a world where technology is always changing, it's important to hang on to those fundamental navigation skills, because what if you're in a situation where you just don't have access to GPS or your phone battery dies?
Yeah.
Then those skills become super important.
That's a good point. I'm starting to rethink my relationship with my GPS a little bit.
All about balance.
But for those of us who want to, break free from that blue dot and reclaim our navigational independence, are there any practical tips for how we can wean ourselves off of technology?
Yeah, for sure. Start by setting small goals that you can actually achieve. Maybe pick a route you usually do with GPS.
Mm-hmm.
And try it without your phone. Pay attention to those landmarks, the street names, just the overall layout. Another good tip is to, throughout the day, just kind of ask yourself which way is north.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds super simple, but it can really help you spatially and develop your sense of direction.
So instead of just blindly following the blue dot,
Mm-hmm.
I need to use my brain and be an active participant in the process. Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, I can do that. But what about when I'm in a totally new place and I'm feeling completely lost? What do I do then?
Don't be afraid to ask for directions.
Yeah.
It might seem obvious, but sometimes the simplest solutions are the best. And if you're exploring a new city, think about taking a walking tour or even just wandering around without a specific destination in mind.
Yeah.
It lets you immerse yourself in the environment. You might discover something new, and you're building that mental map without even realizing it.
Okay, so embrace the adventure.
Yes.
And don't be afraid to get a little lost along the way.
Exactly. Some of the best things happen when you get off the beaten path.
That is true. Well, this has been such a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
We've learned so much about the science behind navigation, how our experiences and cultures influence our sense of direction, and all the different ways that we can improve our skills. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep those brains engaged, and never be afraid to get a little lost every now and then.
Mm-hmm.